I have heard that too, that if there are no human beings, then the earth would return to great vitality. But in truth, what's been happening without human beings is that we have been returning into these ice ages. And when the earth would go into these ice ages, we'd have huge mass extinctions, which is not good for the earth either. And so here humans came along unknowingly. We were deforesting and having our animal agriculture and taking up more and more land. But as a result, we're putting more and more carbon dioxide up in the atmosphere, and we actually stabilize the climate. And there's a professor in Virginia, William Redeman, who has published on this. And so humans haven't been all bad. I think it's just that we haven't recognized that we have a purpose on Earth as a collective species, and that's to stabilize the climate. We stabilized the climate unknowingly earlier, and now it's time for us to do so consciously.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Creating a Vegan World. Today we're speaking with Arvin from United in Heart, addressing the solution for climate change. So I just had a brief conversation with him before this call, and he has some really amazing solutions that I've never heard of before. And he's part of some great communities doing great things to try to reverse climate change and make this sustainable life on Earth. Thank you for joining us, Arvin.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Andrew.
Great, so let's jump right in. What is the solution?
Great question. Yeah, so we first need to properly describe the problem. There's too much carbon in the atmosphere. So if we reduce the amount of carbon we add to the atmosphere, it doesn't really solve the problem. We're on this track where we're heating up the Earth. The Earth is catching up to all the carbon that's already up there. There's a 40-year lag to how much the carbon we put up and the heating that we feel on Earth. And so we're all feeling this heating up that's going on, and we're racing towards 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is considered a tipping point where things will now have all these positive feedback loops and run out of control. It's considered the point of no return. So we need to, before that point, reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. And the way to do so is through going vegan, making more land available because, of course, the vegan diet requires less land, and then reforesting the extra land. And if we do that, if we reforest 41% of the land that's currently used for grazing by animals, it will sequester 265 gigatons of carbon out of the atmosphere, which is more than the 240 gigatons of carbon we've added to the atmosphere from 1750 to 2015. So it is possible to stop climate change.
Amazing. And I love your solution where it's like, first we have to also address the problem and like how we're continuing to contribute to it. That's like, I know, getting the liposuction surgery to lose weight while you continue to eat. So if you don't fix the root cause, then it'll keep being a problem. So for people who might not know the specifics of it, you just say go vegan, why specifically does that work? Is it because of all the factory farming releases the carbon emissions? Can you address that real quickly?
Yeah, so I mean, in rough terms, I like to say that there's about a 10 to 13 to 1 ratio as far as land use. We make land, we'll have 10 to 13 times more land available to us if we all switch to a vegan diet. And that's because there's incredible inefficiency in getting our food through an animal. So the animal eats food, and then we eat the animal. If you look at the total global average, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, as to how much food we feed our animals and how much food we obtain from them, it comes to approximately a 40 to 1 ratio, which is absolutely stunning. And I think technical terms, it's around 39.5 or something like that to 1 ratio. And we can simply make more land available by switching our diet to a vegan diet and just bypassing the animals.
Absolutely, get more food. And then I didn't hear the 41 before. I always heard the analogy throwing out 9 plates of pasta to eat 1. So regardless if it's 9 or 40, it's still a lot of food waste on that side. And I guess all the trees that take the carbon out of the atmosphere, that's being torn down to make room for cattle production. So a lot of people don't
That's
see
right.
that.
That's
So
right.
do you want to talk more about, I guess, the app that you're doing? There's a gamification model that encourages people and it plays with people's psychology to help them do the right thing. Can you talk about that a little bit and explain what your app does?
Absolutely. So our app, on a high level, it gets people focused on three things because we believe that these three things are going to help focus the movement to solve climate change. And that's one, go vegan; two, communicate the vegan reforestation climate solution; and three, plant trees veganically, which means no animal manure. Virtually everywhere else on the planet, if you were to plant trees, they use animal manure. Through our app, you can plant trees without animal manure. As far as the gamification, people can earn points that we call enviros through different mechanisms. And one is simple, and really, one relates to awareness, and the other two relate to constructive action and achieving your goals. So we have like a goal setting feature in our app, and as you achieve your goals, you get enviros. You also get it for awareness. So for watching videos, we have about 250 videos on our app. Reading articles, we reference about 60, 70 articles, but essentially we see that awareness and action, when you couple them together, it's very powerful. In fact, one way of looking at love is awareness and action, right? Seeing the needs of others and acting accordingly. And that's what the app helps people do. It educates and empowers them to act in a way that allows for a sustainable Earth.
Amazing. And the reason I'm fascinated about the gamification is because I studied a lot of psychology and like marketing, where there's all those like game apps where they have like the bells and the whistles that make you go to one next to another and just keeps you going. Whereas a lot of people doing solutions, they have the great information there, but it's the equivalent of reading a textbook where it's there, but the mainstream or like a lot of people are not going to do it because it doesn't really compete against those games or like checking Facebook notifications. So that's why I'm really excited you're doing that. So before the call, you mentioned the 1992 UN summit with 3 things that are essential for life to survive on Earth. Can you explain what they are and go into detail a little bit more?
Absolutely, yeah. So that was a critical time where three sort of Earth systems were identified, and one is biodiversity, 2 is ecosystems, and 3 is climate, greenhouse gas concentration. And so, biodiversity loss was happening at an alarming rate back then. Ecosystems were they were worried about them collapsing, and then of course the trajectory towards climate change. And each of these should be a principal concern for us now, because we really didn't change our course since 1992. Back in 1992, you have to imagine that there was an article written that was signed by over half the Nobel laureates in science, stating, a warning to humanity for which, the direction we're going, and we didn't change our course, unfortunately. So what we're seeing with, for instance, ecosystems collapse and biodiversity loss, they're interlinked. We are emptying our oceans of fish, and that's not sustainable. If we continue down that track, eventually what's going to happen is that the ocean ecosystems will collapse. And the ocean is responsible for 50% of the oxygen on Earth, and it sequesters maybe around 30% of the carbon dioxide. We simply cannot survive on an Earth wherein the ocean ecosystem collapses.
It's crazy to hear. I think it was when I was watching Seaspiracy where I realized that the ocean sequesters so much carbon, and I just thought it was just the trees and the forest. So, and I think I remember hearing something like if the bees go extinct, then life on Earth would be destroyed. If humans go extinct, then life on Earth and other areas would thrive. So if you talk more about biodiversity and why ecosystems and everything there is so important.
Yeah, so we're all interlinked, right? So there's this interrelationship. that is happening between all of life to form those ecosystems. And so you can't have, the bees are a part of an ecosystem. And if there are no bees, then the ecosystem begins to collapse, right? Just like I was describing with the fish. And so we're interrelated. Now, I have heard that too, that if there are no human beings, then the earth would return to great vitality. But in truth, what's been happening without human beings is that we have been returning into these ice ages. And when the earth would go into these ice ages, we'd have huge mass extinctions, which is not good for the earth either. And so here humans came along unknowingly. We were deforesting and having our animal agriculture and taking up more and more land. But as a result, we're putting more and more carbon dioxide up in the atmosphere, and we actually stabilize the climate. And there's a professor in Virginia, William Redeman, who has published on this. And so humans haven't been all bad. I think it's just that we haven't recognized that we have a purpose on Earth as a collective species, and that's to stabilize the climate. We stabilized the climate unknowingly earlier, and now it's time for us to do so consciously, knowingly.
Amazing. Yeah, that's much more optimistic view than the pessimistic that humans just destroy the earth. So thank you for that wake-up call. And I just had a conversation yesterday. I interviewed the founder of a vegan dating app / friend finder app, where they're trying to build community. And they mentioned going to a festival, like a music festival with like 99% vegans. And they noticed at that festival, when they left, the grass was clean, the garbage was picked up, everything was amazing. Then another one where everything was destroyed, they had like a side-by-side picture they saw. And I was like, what is it about veganism that just like has people act a different way? And you mentioned something here as far as we play a role in the ecosystem. And what went through my mind is like a lot of people, they're self-focused. Not saying that in a negative way, but just like the way we are, like when somebody eats food, it's self-focused. We don't understand what happens beyond us. So I wonder what it is within the human or psychology that allows us to make the shift, like where you are, where a lot of vegans are, to see our effects beyond our own actions, to how it impacts the world. And a lot of times we don't see it, but with the internet coming out of so much information, then hopefully there's more awareness, and that's enough.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I noticed that people that grow up in one culture and they move to another, they oftentimes are forced to see things differently and see it from other people's point of view, and really appreciate other perspectives. And it's like consciousness opening, if you will. And the same, I think, is true to some extent for veganism, because we're really shifted into a different way of doing things, forced to, because we've made this decision consciously. No, I'm not going to hurt animals. I'm going to live in a certain way. And I like the way Will Tuttle describes it. He describes veganism as boundless inclusivity. I like that a lot, boundless inclusivity. And so when we come into an approach that way, it begins to influence our other faculties, like we were saying, the litter. And I think that it's very natural for people, as they kind of open up to new perspectives, to be more inclusive and more considerate and respectful of what, of the rights of others around them.
Definitely. And it must be something built into our DNA as well, because I do marketing, and I was working with a client where he's not even vegan, but he retired early, just created a video about that. And I guess he was just relaxing, doing this, and kind of grew unfulfilled. Then his conclusion was to contribute to society, to give back. Like that's where the fulfillment comes in. So for myself, I donated to the WWF Australia to help rehabilitate koalas. So an advertisement for that, or just like doing something beyond yourself has a sense of fulfillment, which is great. And somehow it's built into us. I'll find a psychologist to interview on this channel about that topic, but transitioning back to what you're doing. So you said there's 5 multipliers for helping, I guess, repair and rebuild the ecosystems and everything you're talking about. Can you go into that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I talk about these multipliers, I mean they create abundance in multiple dimensions. And the first is obvious, if you will. It's veganism. And it creates food abundance, right? There's plenty of food for everyone if the world goes vegan. Land abundance, there's extra land. You can reforest 41% of it, 41% of that grazing land and stabilize the climate, and there's extra land still to boot. Water abundance. But in addition to these, in addition to veganism, the ones that are less known is vegan reforestation, reforesting the extra land made available by changing our diet. That allows for, of course, stabilizing the climate, but it allows for biodiversity. Really that and restoring ecosystems. And the third is food forests. The trees that are planted through our app are essentially part of food forests on villagers' own land to create food sovereignty within 5 to 7 years. And that's the promise, is that for every 60 trees, we uplift one family, and I can go into that later. But essentially, food forests create food abundance and a sustainable livelihood for people on the front lines of climate change. It's just beautiful. Fourth, rainwater harvesting. That means building bunds and gabions and swales to capture water and keep it on the land or feed the local aquifers. And the group that we work with to do the tree planting and do the rainwater harvesting with our app, they were able to raise the water table in their arid, dry location in India, raise the water table 19 feet, such that wells that were dry in the summer produce water, supply water year round. And not only that, but they were able to create more trees, because with all that water on the land, trees were able to come up. 120,000 trees came up without ever being planted as natural forest regrowth. And that's just simply by having more water. So that's another form of abundance. And of course, when you have more trees, you have more biodiversity. And then lastly, the fifth one is communication around these four things, which our app also empowers people to deal with by providing a number of videos that they can share through the app.
Amazing. And I just had a really unique thought when you were talking about all this stuff about the thinking beyond ourselves, kind of going back to that in my mind, where imagine the earth is a house. There's animals living in the bathtub, there's swimming around, there's fish there, there's plants in the living room, and it's like the equivalent of like pouring bacon grease in the bathtub and then cutting down the plants in the living room and just viewing things that way. We're all in this together, so doing the right thing. And speaking of doing the right thing, people who are viewing this and they want to make a change to, obviously going vegan is a big thing because it helps with slowing down and preventing the further destruction. But at the practical level, someone in the United States, someone in the United Kingdom, someone in Australia listening to this, what could they do specifically to help support your mission and support the mission of rebuilding the climate?
Thanks for asking. What we're approaching a number of vegan influencers to do is to get behind these three initiatives. So one is, the message, in my opinion, needs to be very consistent. We have to do three things. We have to go vegan, we have to engage in vegan reforestation, and we have to plant trees without animal manure, right? And a person that does all three is what we at United in Heart, what we call an active participant. And our goal is rather ambitious, I must admit, but our goal is to get to that number of 250 million active participants, because there's this thing called the 3.5% rule. It's laid out by, it was discovered by Erica Chenoweth, a Harvard professor, that if you can get 3.5% or more of a population work together in a nonviolent movement in the face of a crisis, that they almost always win. That's what she's found in the study of over 100 movements. And that's what we're doing. That's the plan for us, and that's what the app is all about. It's trying to get people focused on three things: diet, carbon, which is which is really knowing the planting trees, and then communication, which is communicate the vegan reforestation climate solution. The expectation is not for everyone to memorize all these numbers and all these facts, but instead to simply share the videos that we've created, because that'll do all the work for them. You know, talk to your friends, talk to your family members, explain to them that this is actually in their best interest, because it will create, it'll help create a thriving, socially just, sustainable Earth.
Amazing. Then you mentioned, I heard this twice in interviews in 2 days, the point of no return. So while I do these interviews, I've been vegan for 3 years, and I do my best for the environment. I donated to plant trees for my organization, and I'm actively doing these things, but somehow I must admit, like in my psychology, it's like, I don't see the crisis, or I see the crisis, but it's not like the level of being convinced about it. Does that make sense? Where, what do you feel like there's sort of that 3% of the population during a crisis? Sometimes we hear logical information, but like, is there something you could say that would really allow to hit a deeper level with people viewing this that will get people to really wake up?
Yeah, so it's the reason why it's a climate emergency is that the safe zone of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is 350 parts per million. And that's rock, that is like iron tight science. I mean, it's just really, really well-found, well-supported science, published both in the journal Science and Nature, 2009 and 2015. So that people agree on that, scientists agree on that. And we passed 350 parts per million in 1988. And there's a 40-year gap, 40-year lag between cause and effect, which is why at the end of this decade, we're rapidly approaching this point of no return. Like I said, there's a lot of carbon up in the atmosphere. There's about 789 gigatons of carbon in the atmosphere, I think, as of around 2016 or so. And you have to imagine there's about 1,500 gigatons of carbon in the Arctic permafrost. And as it's melting, it's going up into the atmosphere. And people refer to it as the methane bomb. I refer to it as the ice carbon bomb. That's why it's the point of no return. Once you start that cycle of heating up the Arctic too much, and it is melting very quickly already, then you pass the point of no return. You cannot sequester all that carbon just with trees. At some point, it becomes too difficult. And so this next 5 years, if we're lucky 10, is make or break. And we need to start planting trees now. We need your help to come to our app and plant trees. We need more people to go vegan. We need more people to be aware of the urgency.
Definitely. Can you describe what would happen past at no point of return? What
Right. So the point of no return is when we can no longer stop it. It's irreversibly setting off a chain of events for which we cannot stop. So if you look at that, that means a future that it's a very scary world, because it means people don't have hope. And if you take away hope, how well does the stock market do? How well does your long-term investments do? So we need to do what we can to strengthen the faith, strengthen the resolve to create a brighter future. We have to do it now while we can.
Definitely picture like a post-apocalyptic type world where like the growing fields dry up and return to something like Mars.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's probably...
I don't know. I know that let's say plus 4 degrees Celsius world doesn't supply a lot of food, and again we think in terms of linear change. You know, like eventually 2 degrees and 2.5, but in truth, this will happen exponentially once you go past the point at some point. We don't know at 2 degrees Celsius, maybe it is, or or 1.7 or what, we don't know, but at some point it's going to go up exponentially because, again, of all that carbon up in the Arctic. So people cannot survive on an Earth that's +5 degrees, +6 degrees. It's just not survivable.
Absolutely. I made a mistake on my last interview by asking the worst case scenario question last. So let's end on a positive note where I guess we make this change. We plant the trees, people go vegan, everything's being healed. Maybe instead of like the exponential growth, the chart begins to decline. So can you describe an ideal scenario of what the Earth would look like if we fulfill our mission?
Yeah, great question. So I think that, first and foremost, it's going to be a shift, right? So right now, we have a perspective of consume more, you'll be happy. And we think of our abundance in terms of consumption. But we can create a different kind of abundance, right? We can create food abundance and food sovereignty for people in the global South and still enjoy food abundance here. So we have food forests. We would have biodiversity, just thriving and just a beautiful world. So we could see, if the oceans were left alone, they could rebound very quickly, as commented by George Monbiot, a well-known environmentalist. So it is possible for us to see a thriving Earth as far as abundance of food, abundance of biodiversity, and a stable climate. That's all possible. We just have to lean into it. It's a lack of, forgive me if I sound too abrasive, but a lack of faith and resolve in the solutions that can really get us to point B, to the place we need to go.
Definitely. And one final question I have is, what obstacles are standing in the way? Or I have two questions. One is, what obstacles are standing in the way from doing this presently?
Right now, there's so much information and a lot of misinformation, sadly, about the destructive presence of animal agriculture. It's the leading cause of deforestation. It causes so many problems in so many levels. So if we can sidestep that and be able to see that veganism is powerful, vegan is not a bad word, that boundless inclusivity is a beautiful thing, and let's embrace this and let's see where it takes us, I think that a lot of good things will happen.
And for other people listening to this, like in the vegan world or the environmental sustainability world, what do we need? Like what gaps are missing, or like opportunities that people could jump in and start, I guess, doing their passion and being a leader to solve?
Yeah, so well, one way is we try to empower vegan climate activists through our app. And our app indicates the number of people that they inspire directly, and then all the people downstream in their downstream network. So a person could have 1,000 people, not by virtue of contacting 1,000, but maybe inspiring 2 or 3 that inspired others. And so you see that 1,000 people, and then if each of those planted 5 trees through our app, that's 5,000 trees. Actually, this, for simple terms, if there were 6,000 trees planted by the app user and anyone and their people in their downstream network, at 60 trees, one uplifted family, that comes to 100 uplifted families. And in these villages, some of them are 10 families strong. So it's like 10 villages. One person could uplift 10 villages simply by getting the message out, using our tool, using our app to plant trees and to communicate about vegan reforestation.
That'd be great if you would see the change that they're making, where once they submit, then this is the family, this is the village you help. That'd be really cool to see. Perhaps the future for the future.
In the future, if we can get that detail, that'd be great. We're just starting, so it's just these 3 areas that they're working in: Haiti, Kenya and India, they're planting trees in those places. And the group that we're working with, they take $0. They're totally unpaid. All of them, all of the volunteers planting trees are completely unpaid, and they're just absolutely incredible. And currently, we at United in Heart are unpaid too. So we feel very, we fit right in.
You're part of the community there. Cool. So I know we talked about a lot of stuff. Is there any final messages you have for people, and then just tell people where they could find your app at the end of that?
Okay, yeah. So I think just the one thing to add is that there's a lot of skepticism. People will say to me that they don't really believe, how is it that you're really uplifting a family for 60 trees? I don't know if we can really believe that. So I'll give you an example in Haiti, right? So they our partner, they plant many native trees, including the Maya nut tree. So one mature Maya nut tree, so that's enough to supply protein for one person in Haiti at 45 grams per day. And currently in Haiti, 1 out of 3 people are protein deficient, and they're going hungry basically, and they're getting 30 grams of protein per day. So this would be a 50% increase in the amount of protein they're getting by planting one tree. And we're saying, hey, if we plant 60, we'll uplift one family. And the tree survival rates are 90% or more for us out in the forest. So we have every reason to believe that they are being honest with us, that they can uplift families. And so we say the same thing with our messaging. As far as how to move forward with our app, please find us on the Apple App Store. We're only on Apple right now. We're available for iPads and iPhones. If you tend to watch your video material on your iPad, not your iPhone, then go with your iPad when you do your download. Basically, there's a lot of great video materials too. So please use the device that you want to watch videos on. As far as Android, that's another 2 months away.
Definitely. And by the time I post this video, I'm not sure when I'll post it, so it might be live by the time this is out there.
Yeah.
I have 13 interviews lined up. So once again, can you just say the name of your app so people could search for it and remember it?
And the name of the app is the United in Heart app. It's called the United in Heart.
Great. And then the website, just in case people go there first.
Yeah, and our website is unitedinheart.org.